In the early morning hours of Memorial Day in 2018, the tranquil atmosphere of the affluent city of Thousand Oaks, California, was shattered by an incident that defied comprehension. According to witnesses, it was a startling display of unimaginable violence, a chilling testament to the depths of human brutality. Local law enforcement rushed to the scene in response to frantic calls, unsure of what awaited them. What they encountered was pure bedlam. A frenzied assailant, surrounded by a sea of blood, inflicted savage injuries not only on a fellow human being, but on the very concept of order and decency. The officers who arrived were left reeling, struggling to believe their own eyes. In their desperate attempts to subdue the aggressor, deputies resorted to various methods, only to be met with failure again and again. It was as if they had stumbled upon a malevolent force, even leading some officers to entertain the notion of demonic possession. Defense attorneys and medical experts had a name for it: a cannabis-induced psychotic episode. Law enforcement eventually brought this terrifying situation under control, but the nightmare of that fateful Memorial Day lingered. In the years that followed, the victims' family members would be forced to grapple with courtroom delays and legal decisions that defied their expectations. In this video, we will report on the facts of the crime, court proceedings, and its outcome. With that said, let's dive into the haunting story of Dr. Bryn Spejcher and her controversial defense. The weed made me do it. A word to the viewer. Addressing the question of whether marijuana can cause a psychotic episode falls outside the scope of this channel. This topic has been the subject of numerous medical studies. The DSM-5, a key diagnostic tool in psychiatry, acknowledges cannabis-induced psychotic disorder as part of the schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders category. On the other hand, there are staunch anti-cannabis groups that circulate materials that could only be characterized as propaganda aimed at demonizing cannabis. Given the complexity and the varied perspectives on this issue, it is best left to experts in the field to provide clarity and insights.
Adam, 366 Adam, 2112 South St. Paul Street. On report of a domestic violence in progress. RP versus her husband has been smoking marijuana. Advised they do keep a handgun in the house, but it's not in anybody's possession.
According to notes, she grabbed the gun. She screamed and the line disconnected. They step up cover. Yeah.
353 Adam, I'm clear. I'll watch that way to 45.
62 Adam, not too far. 33 Adam, 33 Baker. Need ambulance, code cancel, party down. Possible GSA to head. We got need homicide.
In 2014, 50-year-old Colorado man Richard Kirk pleaded guilty to second-degree murder after shooting his wife in the head at the couple's home in Denver. Kirk was initially charged with first-degree murder, but this charge was downgraded after his attorneys argued that a marijuana edible, which Kirk was consuming for back pain, had severely impaired his judgment. They contended he had suffered involuntary intoxication because he did not know he was at high risk for marijuana psychosis based on a family history of schizophrenia. Kirk entered a guilty plea for one charge of second-degree murder, thus avoiding a trial where his defense of involuntary intoxication would have been tested. However, this particular defense strategy would eventually resurface in a courtroom in the case of California versus Bryn Spejcher. 26-year-old Chad O'Melia was widely regarded by those who knew him best as a kind, considerate, and outgoing individual. A Santa Clara native, he attended Hart High School and excelled at football there. He graduated from Chico State University and worked at an accounting firm in Camarillo while studying to be a CPA. Most of all, he loved his family and his German shepherd named Athena. He shared a 3-bedroom condominium on Megan Place just off Thousand Oaks Boulevard with 2 roommates. Sometime between late April and early May 2018, Chad had a chance encounter at a dog park with 27-year-old Bryn Spejcher. They hung out several times and had what was described by friends as a harmonious relationship. Spejcher would later state, "I thought he was very funny. He was really nice to me. We were always sarcastic with each other. He ended up being a really nice, funny person when I got to know him." In the few weeks they had known each other, there was no indication of any troubles at all. Originally from Illinois, Bryn Spejcher was born to Mike and Laurie Spejcher in January 1991. Her childhood was marked by medical challenges, including a diagnosis of hearing loss at the age of 3, which nearly led to complete deafness. In a video shared on the Facebook page of Washington University School of Medicine, Spejcher opened up about her experiences, saying, "It was difficult to try and be normal because I didn't want to be the only one with hearing loss. It was really hard for me to advocate for myself and be open about having hearing loss. I was very involved in sports and music and trying to get good grades in classes. I wanted to blend in with everybody else." Spejcher's early struggles with hearing loss profoundly influenced her career path, leading her to devote her life to helping others with similar conditions. Despite her own hearing impairments and the need for hearing aids, she achieved remarkable academic success, earning a doctorate in audiology from the prestigious Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis in 2017. Recognized for her exceptional promise and academic prowess, Spejcher was awarded the Max E. Goldstein Award. As a member of both the American Academy of Audiology and the American Speech-Language Hearing Association, her expertise spans a range of areas, including adult and pediatric diagnostics, auditory brainstem response testing, and the application of hearing aids and cochlear implants. After earning her doctorate in audiology in 2017, she relocated to Thousand Oaks and began her career at the House Children's Hearing Center of UCLA in Los Angeles. According to a former classmate, Spejcher did not do illicit drugs and was not a habitual marijuana user. Spejcher had no prior criminal history and no record of violence. On the evening of May 27, 2018, Spejcher was out with friends in Santa Barbara, where she consumed a small amount of alcohol. She was later invited to Chad's place to watch a movie. Spejcher arrived at Chad's condo sometime between 10 to 10:30 p.m. that evening, bringing along her Siberian husky, Arya. Chad's 2 male roommates were also present, each engaged in their own activities within their rooms. The stage was set for what appeared to be a tranquil Sunday evening, a potential spark for romance between 2 young individuals. However, beneath this veneer of normalcy, tension was brewing, poised to transform the night into something far removed from a typical romantic rendezvous. In the early morning hours of Monday, May 28th, residents of the Casa de Oaks condominium complex on Megan Place reported hearing a loud altercation followed by screams coming from an apartment occupied by 3 male roommates.
Hear screaming and enough that I could hear it 4 buildings over, and then it kind of like stopped a little bit, and then I heard it go on, and then I heard a woman screaming, and then this, and then I started hearing blood-curdling screams.
Shortly after 1 a.m., deputies received a report of a disturbance. Arriving at the condo by approximately 1:15 a.m., they were met with a scene of turmoil. There, they discovered a wounded service dog, Chad lying in a pool of his own blood, and Spejcher, blood-stained as well, kneeling beside him and screaming hysterically. In her hand, she clutched an 8-inch-long serrated knife. Despite officers' orders to drop the knife, Spejcher did not comply. Instead, she responded with an expletive and then alarmingly turned the knife towards herself. Recounting the incident, one officer noted, "I saw her plunge the knife into her neck." Published reports indicate that the police first attempted to subdue Spejcher using a taser, but to their surprise, it was ineffective. Even a second deployment of the taser failed to stop her. The police then resorted to using a retractable steel baton, but the initial strike was also unsuccessful in disarming her. Persisting, the officers continued to use the baton, delivering a total of 9 blows before they could finally disarm her. However, by this time, Spejcher had already inflicted a staggering 108 stab wounds on Chad, as confirmed by the Ventura County Medical Examiner's Office. Additionally, the baton strikes resulted in a fractured left wrist and hand for Spejcher. After she was detained, one of the officers on the scene observed that Chad was not breathing. He was soon declared deceased at the location. Approximately 5 minutes later, an ambulance arrived and Spejcher was taken to Los Robles Regional Medical Center. In the wake of this shocking event, neighbors were left in a state of profound disbelief and distress, struggling to come to terms with the realization that such a horrifying incident had occurred in their immediate vicinity.
When the Ventura County sheriffs arrived, one man was dead and one female had to be rushed to the hospital. Deputies won't confirm how the man died or what the motive for his killing was, stopping short of calling this a murder and attempted suicide.
We don't believe there are any outstanding suspects at this point, so whatever it was confined to the inside the residence is what our theory is at this point.
The deadly incident happened inside one of those apartments just behind me at the Casa de Oaks apartment complex here in Thousand Oaks, where investigators are trying to find witnesses and collect as much evidence as possible.
In the hospital before her surgery, Spejcher was interviewed by an officer. According to the officer's report, Spejcher did not know what happened and did not know how she sustained her injuries. Spejcher asked me where Chad was currently. Spejcher denied she consumed alcohol or drugs. Spejcher asked me where she was at one point during the interview, the officer noted. 3 days later, while still hospitalized, she was questioned by a detective. As per a report posted on the Thousand Oaks Acorn website, dated May 9, 2019, and authored by Becca Whitnall, Sergeant Stephen Jenkins testified to Spejcher's account of what transpired on the 28th. Apparently, at some point in the early hours, Chad stepped out of the condo to smoke marijuana, and at that point, she told him she'd like to try it as well. After smoking and feeling no effects, she claims Chad said, "I'll give you something stronger." He allegedly refilled the bong, and Spejcher told the detective they both took a second hit of marijuana. Spejcher recounted experiencing a severe adverse reaction immediately after the second hit. She reported feeling as if she couldn't breathe and believed she was on the brink of death. She also noted feeling angry when she realized that she was high, while Chad seemed unaffected. Spejcher detailed a hallucination in which she perceived herself as dead. Convinced that this hallucination was reality, she believed injuring Chad was necessary in order to resurrect herself. This belief led her to attack both him and her dog. Sergeant Jenkins recounted her mentioning the voices encouraged her to keep fighting, keep doing what you're doing. Upon the arrival of deputies, these perceived voices urged her to inflict harm on herself. After a 4-night stay in the hospital, Spejcher was released and immediately arrested on site. Her bail was set at $510,000. Her first court appearance was scheduled for June 4th. Upon successfully posting bail on June 7th, Spejcher was released from custody and remained free while awaiting trial. She was initially charged with first-degree murder and 1 count of animal abuse. During their investigation, detectives learned Chad's 2 roommates were witnesses to the chaotic and violent event, but did not physically intervene. They felt the best chance to save Chad was to contact the police as quickly as possible. Police described the roommates as fully cooperative. Forensic analysis of Spejcher's blood, as confirmed by the sheriff's crime lab, revealed the presence of THC and no illicit substances. Further examination of the remnants of burned plant material in Chad's bong and 5 grams of marijuana seized from his apartment showed no substances other than THC. The marijuana found in the condo, sourced from an unlicensed delivery service, had a THC concentration of 4%, significantly lower than the levels typically found in cannabis sold at legal dispensaries, where THC content often exceeds 20% and more potent strains are available. Blood tests were also conducted on Chad, which likewise identified THC as the only psychoactive compound present. On June 22, 2018, 3 weeks after Spejcher's arrest, the Speech-Language Pathology and Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispensers Board of California filed a request via the State Attorney General's Office to suspend Spejcher's license to practice. Spejcher appeared in court on July 12th to defend her license, but a Ventura County Superior Court judge ruled she would not be allowed to practice in the time before her criminal trial. The baffling case of Bryn Spejcher and Chad O'Melia, laden with unresolved issues and shocking violence, had left the community seeking answers. While Chad's family awaited justice, Spejcher's family asserted her wrongful accusation. Following a lengthy 5-year period filled with legal postponements due to defense tactics, the trial was finally scheduled to begin in October 2023. This pivotal moment promised to provide answers to the pressing question: did Bryn Spejcher experience a cannabis-induced psychotic episode, or was she conscious of her actions during the fatal stabbing of Chad O'Melia? As the trial approached, it became apparent that there were still unexpected developments yet to unfold. At a court hearing on September 27, 2023, to the great surprise of the O'Melia family, Spejcher's charges were reduced from murder to involuntary manslaughter by Ventura County prosecutors. This decision came after their medical expert agreed with the defense's medical expert on her mental state. While second-degree murder could have led to a life sentence, manslaughter generally carries a maximum of 4 years in prison. The decision came less than a month before the scheduled jury trial. As the judge ruled on the motion and Spejcher entered a not guilty plea, cries could be heard from the gallery where Chad's friends and family sat. A defiant Sean O'Melia, Chad's father, declared to the judge, "She was aware of what she was doing when she viciously and prematurely ended my son's life."
I'm here because on the 14th of this month, our family was completely ambushed by the Ventura County DA's office. 5.5 years later, they wanted to try this case for involuntary manslaughter. There was an eyewitness to the crime. Well, the roommate, Chad cried out to him and he said, "Vinny," he goes, "I need you to call the police. I've been stabbed, and get out of the condominium." So, he's getting stabbed and he's worried about his roommate. Get out of here, She was in some form of hallucination. But if you go through, the different types of consciousness, that's one of them. She was not unconscious. She knew what she was doing, and she was actually making choices. She acted with intent to kill somebody, in line with what the original DA, Greg Toten of Ventura County, filed his charges for. It's also in line with what the original Deputy DA, Catherine Volker, discussed with our family and expressed to our family. We as a family feel like we were completely ambushed by these people. I've never seen a group of people try to fight the opposition's fight as much as they did. We're in a place now that Audrey Knopfsinger, the Deputy DA that's handling the case, she's gonna, by the action that she's taking, she's actually acquitting her of second-degree murder with no trial. Every time we've gone to court, they've asked for a continuance. Every time. We want 60 more days, 60 more days, 60 more days. If you just do the simple math on it, divide 5.5 years by 60 days, it'll tell you how many continuances they've asked for. Let the people of Ventura County hear the evidence and make a decision, And at least at that point, they're giving Chad a chance. They're giving our family a chance. They're giving his friends a chance. And, the people here in the community that actually know him. Right now, they're not giving us a chance. Just prosecute the crime for what it is. It's a murder.
The state's medical expert, Dr. Chris Mohandy, testified that Spejcher's marijuana use that night triggered a psychotic episode that led her to kill. Because of her use of cannabis, she was having delusions and hallucinations. She lost touch with reality, said Dr. Mohandy. The defense's medical expert, Dr. William Wershing, said he is essentially 100% confident in his diagnosis of Spejcher as suffering from cannabis-induced psychosis. "I don't think I can be 100% certain about anything, but this is as certain as I can be about anything." Ultimately, according to the prosecutor, based on the fact that both sides' expert witnesses came to the same conclusion, the evidence no longer supported a charge of murder in that the evidence establishes that the defendant acted with criminal negligence but not with malice in killing the victim. In their opening statements, attorneys for both the defense and prosecution agreed on most of the facts of the case. Therefore, the main question for the jury to decide would be whether Spejcher met the legal definition of involuntary intoxication. According to the prosecution, Spejcher's intoxication was voluntary because she chose to smoke from the bong that was offered to her. Senior prosecutor Audrey Nafziger contended, "The law says when someone voluntarily ingests an intoxicant and bad things happen, like a DUI, the person responsible is the person who voluntarily ingests the intoxicant and does the bad thing. We don't get to blame other people when we do something bad because we wanted to get high." Defense attorney Robert Schwartz responded that his client did not actually want to get high. He conceded Chad did not intend for her to have such an extreme reaction, but the evidence will show he knew what the potentially devastating effects could be to a novice user, and he didn't tell her that. Schwartz was alluding to the testimony of one of Chad's roommates, who had also had a negative experience with marijuana smoked from Chad's bong. This roommate recounted that approximately 2 months prior to the stabbing incident, he experienced a distressing reaction the first time he smoked marijuana with Chad and another friend. He described his experience, saying, "I started to see the walls and people's faces moving, like the ocean, and I felt my heart beating really fast. I told them I felt like I was dying." He noted that these symptoms eventually subsided without intervention. Spejcher chose to testify in her defense and was the last witness called by her attorneys. She claimed that on the night of May 27, 2018, Chad had asked her to go to his apartment. The pair initially watched TV and talked a little. Just after midnight, he asked her whether she would like to try marijuana using his bong. Chad is said to have been a habitual cannabis user, smoking or using a bong on most days. Spejcher took a few puffs but told Chad she didn't feel anything. This allegedly led him to respond with a promise of getting something more intense. The court heard that moments after her second hit from the bong, Spejcher grabbed 3 knives from a kitchen block and hurled them at Chad before stabbing him on every part of his body, leaving fatal wounds on his heart, lungs, and neck. While Spejcher initially told officers she asked to smoke, her lawyer refuted that notion. Attorney Schwartz stated that, in fact, Chad pressured her and insisted that she inhale from the bong. Before that night, she had no history of mental illness and no way of knowing that smoking pot would trigger a psychotic episode. After a thorough review of all of the evidence, listening to witness accounts, considering expert testimony, and weighing the closing arguments, the jury withdrew to their chamber for deliberation. This pivotal moment marked the culmination of a long and complex trial, with the jurors now tasked with reaching a verdict that could finally bring a resolution to this intense and emotionally charged case. On Friday, December 1st, 2023, after less than 4 hours of deliberation, a Ventura County Superior Court jury found Bryn Spejcher guilty of involuntary manslaughter for the 2018 killing of Chad O'Melia. This verdict represented a mutual agreement between the prosecution and defense that Spejcher's conduct was the result of a cannabis-induced psychotic episode. Following the verdict, the prosecution submitted a motion for Spejcher's immediate incarceration. However, this motion was overruled by the Honorable Judge Anthony Sabo of the Ventura County Superior Court. As a result, Spejcher was permitted to depart from the court with her counsel and family, pending her sentencing hearing scheduled for January 23, 2024. A separate hearing addressing the charged special allegations and sentence enhancements convened on December 4th. The jury affirmed the special allegation of serious felony against Spejcher, along with the sentence enhancements for a crime involving great violence and armed with and use of a weapon. These additional charges could slightly lengthen her prison term. What is your take on this case? Do you believe the jury got it right? As usual, feel free to share your thoughts below.